As well as understanding the type of animal that we're responding to, it's really important that we understand the situation we're called to resolve, because that may have a bearing on the nature and urgency of our response. Animals may be at immediate risk from fire, from flood, for instance. They may be trapped, they may be loose, they may be marooned. We may be called to assist another agency with a welfare case, or assist them by giving access to enable them to carry out their operational role. So it's really important that we have an understanding of the context of the situation, and also that will lead us to an appreciation of the level of risk that we're responding to as well. The level of risk is really important to understand, and that risk may be to human, may be to animal, may be to both. So an example of a direct human life risk at an animal incident might be a person that's trapped physically with an animal, maybe under a horse, maybe crushed by a cow, for instance. So that really is an urgent situation that needs responding to on the basis predominantly of human safety. There may be an indirect life risk to humans though, because we understand that when animals are involved in an entrapment or in a stressful situation, that members of the public are willing to put themselves at risk to rescue an animal. And therefore we must think carefully about how we respond and the time that it takes to respond to an incident based on the level of risk to people predominantly. We can use the same language when we're thinking about a direct or indirect life risk to animals as well. And we can obviously think of situations that will pose a direct threat to life, fires, floods, entrapments, being loose, for instance. But there are also situations where an indirect life risk may be present, and that would be situations that may escalate in the future, such as wide-scale flooding, for instance. It could be situations where there are boundary and containment problems, where an animal may get loose and then a further situation may occur. So we really need to understand the needs of that incident, firstly before we send resources, but also as the incident develops. What we should never forget when thinking about animals in emergency situations is the human-animal bond, and also the societal expectation that will be on us to take action and to look after animals at the source of their need. It's well proven throughout many disasters and emergencies in the world that if we don't account for the animal component, that then causes human behaviours that put incident management at risk. And therefore it's really important that we start off by planning for these types of situations and resourcing them correctly. The Fire and Rescue Services Act, Section 11, Power to Respond to Other Eventualities, is the legal framework that the Fire and Rescue Service use to develop their response to foreseeable incidents that will affect the life and health of plants and animals. And also, importantly in that subsection, are situations that will cause a member of the public to become ill, injured or die. And the two go quite closely together at most animal rescue incidents. Legislation may determine whether there is a direct or indirect responsibility for taking action at an incident. One of the key pieces of legislation that we need to be aware of is the Animal Welfare Act. And originally it was designed to stop people causing suffering to an animal, but also by failing to act to relieve suffering, people may be held responsible. And as an emergency responder at the scene of an incident, if the owner is incapacitated, we may take the position of temporary responsibility for the animal and for its ongoing welfare needs. So it's really critical that we've thought about this ahead of time and that we've got the sufficient resources to call on to support us at an incident. Some pieces of legislation are there to protect animals and may prevent us from taking instinctive action at an incident. It may be stuff that we've done for many, many years. So one of those pieces of legislation might be the Protection of Badgers Act. Badger sets are very well protected, and if we are called to deal with a dog that's got stuck down a badger set, it's illegal to interfere with that set in any way. And what we would need to do is put in the right control measures, get the right agencies involved and have the right legal authority to take action. When an animal component is identified, the lead organisation then needs to decide whether they have the capabilities to resolve that element of it, or whether they need to bring in other agencies or further resources to help them to resolve it. As an example, if animals are involved in a fire and they're injured or their welfare is compromised, there's a need to ensure that they receive definitive veterinary care. And so we need to have pre-planned relationships and abilities to get resources to the scene, such as the RSPCA, other local animal charities, or indeed relationships with veterinary practices, to ensure that that definitive care is established as quickly as possible.